Hey, welcome back to Explore with John McFall, and I hope you've really enjoyed all of the videos that we've been making over the last few months. And I'd like to do a special shout out. This far we have actually achieved 130,000 subscribers, which is just absolutely amazing, and I really appreciate all the comments and feedback that we have been receiving. So what I want to do today is I want to welcome you to this three-part series where we're going to explore what I think is one of the biggest blind spots in global logistics, and that is visibility of inbound and outbound volume. Whether you're managing freight, running manufacturing, or keeping the store shelves stocked, visibility isn't just helpful, it's mission critical. In this first section, we're going to ask a tough question. If 90% of global trade moves by sea, why do most supply chains still operate in the dark? We're going to unpack the real reasons why visibility remains broken, why fragmented global logistics makes this worse, and how a new visibility maturity model, the one that we use inside Flowise, can help you chart a better course forward. According to the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index, over 50% of global supply chain professionals say they have no reliable visibility beyond Tier 1 suppliers. McKinsey reports that information delays of 30% or more are common in mature supply chains. And Gartner recently found that 76% of supply chain leaders still depend on telephone calls, emails to confirm shipments and status. This creates an enormous risk, because when you can't see what's arriving, when or in what condition, you can't plan, you can't react, and you can't deliver with confidence. What you can do is spend more on buffer, inventory, or expedited freight, and on apologies to your customers. Now, add to that the growing number of point solutions claiming to solve parts of the visibility problem. You might be using a visibility platform, ForeKite, Project 44, to track freight events. You might be using one of the great risk providers out there, such as Everstream AI, to monitor geopolitical or climate risk. You might be using an advanced transportation management system like an Oracle or a Blue Yonder that offers carrier telemetric integration. You could be using advanced cold chain IoT sensors or temperature and humidity monitoring in pharmaceuticals or other perishable goods. Each of these tools adds more data, but that also means more systems, formats, alerts, and silos. In fact, back to our friends Gartner, they note that over 70% of supply chain visibility initiatives struggle just due to integration complexity and a lack of a unified data model. Let's go back to our other friends, McKinsey, because they back this all up, and they're reporting that most organizations use 5 or more visibility platforms across transport, warehouse, and supplier networks, yet only 6% say that they have end-to-end real-time insight. So the paradox is this: the more visibility tools we add, the more fragmented the picture becomes, unless we build a common foundation to make sense of it all. And that's why Flowise is we think it's a little bit different. But to understand how it solves this problem, we first need to understand just how messy things really are. Let's dig deeper into why visibility is so fractured in global logistics. Let's consider a typical international shipment. It might involve a manufacturer, a shipper of record, a freight forwarder, one or more carriers, a customer broker, a terminal operator, an international port authority, an intermodal partner, a distribution center, a third-party logistics, and the list goes on. Now add, in the systems these stakeholders use. They're using ERPs, TMS, WMS, port communication platforms. They're using booking portals. None of these speak the same language by default. Then look inside your own organization itself. Many global manufacturers run multiple SAP instances, one per major region, or even one per business unit. And that means that the same product, let's say for argument's sake, a brake caliper or a consumer electronics component, could be SAP code 1234 Alpha in Europe, or code 5678 X-ray in the US, or it could even be labeled CN Kit Red in Asia, referenced only by packaging code or vendor number in Latin America. Now, multiply this by 4 major SAP or ERP systems, 6+ external partnerships per shipment, dozens of data handoffs and transformation layers. For a company managing 20,000 SKU, this can easily build to 100 to 250,000 variant identifiers across the network. But it doesn't stop there. When you zoom out to the end-tier supplier, including contract manufacturers, component suppliers, packaging, sub-tier providers, the identity problem multiplies exponentially. Many Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers have no shared product catalog. They often assign their own codes and labels, specific to purchase order or customer channel. This means a single product, by the time it reaches you, could have had 10 to 15 unique identifiers applied to it across the ecosystem. In a global supply chain involving 5,000 finished goods and, say, 10,000 raw materials, you're now looking at potentially 500,000 to over 1 million SKU representations across the systems and partners. And if your visibility tools can't resolve all of this back to a single product identifier, then all the tracking in the world won't necessarily help you make a confident decision. Visibility often breaks down not because we lack data, but because the data doesn't agree. To explain this better, let's introduce the FlowWise Visibility Maturity Model. This is a 5-stage framework that maps where your supply chain is today and what it will take to move forward. Let's look at level 1. We like to call it the dark zone. Here you're relying upon emails, spreadsheets, and phone calls to get updates. There's no structured visibility, and disruptions are detected only after they've caused damage. The next level, level 2, is milestone tracking. Here you get static updates like shipped, arrived, or delivered. It's helpful, but it doesn't capture what's happening between milestones, where most of the risk occurs. The next level, level 3, is systems-linked visibility. Here we're getting connected with carrier systems, portals, or freight forwarders. Data flows in, but it's partial, delayed, or inconsistent. It helps, but often not fast or complete enough to make and drive decisive decisions. Level 4 is all about event-driven awareness. You get real-time event updates when something is loaded, unloaded, delayed, or rerouted. You can see disruptions as they happen and begin to build responsiveness. The next level, level 5, is predictive flow control. This is the destination. You not only see what's happening in real time, you can anticipate problems before they escalate. Your system flags early risks, recommended courses of action, and guides the flow of goods like a conductor leads an orchestra. Most global supply chains today, I would estimate, sit somewhere between level 2 and 3. They're tracking milestones and pulling in some digital data, but they're still operating reactively. And this is exactly why we need a visibility maturity model. Because if your system can't resolve what a product is across internal SAP landscape and external trading partners, then you will never actually achieve level 4 or 5. At level 2, milestone tracking, you might know a shipment has departed, but you won't know if the right version of a product is on board. At level 3, system-linked visibility, you might get updates from partners, but unless there's a shared product graph or mapping layer, you're still flying blind when things go wrong. Getting to level 4 or 5 requires more than dashboards. It requires a new architecture for how visibility is captured, structured, and shared. Okay, let's bring this all to life with 6 real-world stories that illustrate just how dangerous partial visibility can be. The first of these is a retail campaign failure. We were working with a UK-based retailer who spent months planning a seasonal promotion. The anchor products, high-margin holiday items, were expected to arrive in port by the 1st of the month. Internal systems showed that the containers are in port. In reality, the vessel had rerouted due to Red Sea disruptions and was still 12 days from arrival. No one had access to live location data, and there was no alert system in place. By the time the mistake was uncovered, the campaign had already launched, billboards were live, ads were running, shelves were empty. Sales fell by 38%, and the marketing team was forced into damage control. The business impact? Seven-figure loss, all because no one knew where the containers actually were. The next story I want to share with you is about a German manufacturer, and they experienced a sudden halt on one of their most critical lines. The system flagged a missing component. It was a part that was expected from a supplier in Belgium. Panicked, the team issued a shortage escalation. They were preparing for premium freight or line rebalancing when a junior logistics analyst discovered the part had actually arrived at the port 2 days earlier. It was fully cleared, but had been sitting idle, waiting for a chassis. The delay wasn't the supplier, wasn't customs, just a domestic bottleneck no one was tracking. The line was down for 11 hours. Recovery took 3 days, all of it avoidable. If they had real-time inland visibility. The next area I want to look at is an air freight disaster in the US. An automotive supplier in the US had invested heavily in international visibility, vessel tracking, port dwell time, even predictive ETAs. Everything looked great, but their transportation planning team was only monitoring the ocean segment. No one was watching the real handoff. As a result, a key shipment missed its inland railway window with an offload with no backup transport. With an OEM line-side delivery deadline looming, they had no choice. The entire shipment was converted to air freight at, and you can imagine, at 3 times the cost. This one failure erased nearly all the cost savings they had worked so hard to achieve that quarter. The next area I want to look at is chasing steel across the globe. We're working with a global manufacturer that produces bespoke steel components for large infrastructure and engineering projects. Their factories are distributed across multiple countries, and every product, it's not even countries, multiple continents, and every product they make is engineered for a specific project, often in completely different countries. Before any item is shipped, they send quality teams that travel to the factories for inspection. Only once it passes the rigorous quality checks are goods released into transit. But once that product leaves the factory floor, the trail goes cold. There's no integrated tracking, no shared updates, no visibility platform. So what happens? Well, the logistics teams get caught in a game of global detective work. They're phoning freight forwarders, calling shipping lines, emailing handlers, WhatsApping contractors, trying to answer the simple question, where is our steel? When will it arrive? And if it's late, what is the impact on the site team waiting to start that work? Instead of focusing on value-added tasks, their planners and project managers are trapped in an endless loop of status chasing. The result? Delays, miscommunication, and totally avoidable stress, all due to a complete lack of visibility once the goods are in motion. The next area I want to look at is offshore, off-grid, and out of sight. We're working with this global energy company that operates a complex offshore network and rigs and platforms. Every day, they move a wide mix of materials out to sea, everything from critical engineering components to fresh food, PPE, consumables, and hygiene supplies. The complexity here isn't just about what's being shipped, it's about the urgency and distance and stakes. When a maintenance team requests a part with the clock ticking already, delays mean downtime. Downtime means lost production. And in the offshore world, the cost compounds quickly. But despite having a structured procurement process and warehouse operations in place, the organization faces 3 major blind spots. Inbound to warehouse. Once an item is ordered, there's limited visibility into it when it will actually arrive at the warehouse, never mind when it will actually arrive in the onshore facility for processing. Outbound to offshore. Even when items are packed and staged for dispatch, the visibility breaks again. There's little clarity on whether goods have been loaded, which vessel is carrying them, or where they are en route to the platform. On-platform consumption. When the shipments arrive offshore, things don't get better. There's minimal tracking of where each item is stored, and importantly, how fast it's being used. This is, particularly problematic for rented equipment, which incurs a daily cost whether it's used or not. The result: hundreds of hours wasted on manual tracking, overages in rental costs, and worst of all, reduce confidence in offshore execution. Without full visibility across the supply, transit, and consumption life cycle, we're flying blind in one of the most critical and high-cost environments on Earth. Another area is the cost of chasing parts. In the automotive sector, we're supporting a global mobility business with a high-performance vehicle fleet which operates in markets across the world. Most of their fleet is managed under lease contracts, which include some really strict uptime guarantees and service level commitments. The core challenge they face can be summed up in one urgent question: where's my part? Here's what happens. When a vehicle becomes unserviceable due to an accident, a failure, or a routine maintenance, it's immediately declared off-road. At that point, the pressure is on. The service team must source the required part and get it to the location of the vehicle as quickly as possible. Because the operation is decentralized and visibility is limited, the default response is air freight the component, often internationally, to meet the contractual SLAs. It's fast, but it's extremely costly. And what makes this even more frustrating is that in many cases, the parts they needed already exist in country. It might be in transit from a supplier, sitting in an intermediary warehouse, or idle in bonded storage. But the team can't see it. And because they can't see it, they can't allocate or redirect it. So they air freight the part again at a premium. The result, over $2 million wasted annually on unnecessary emergency air freight. But not because the part wasn't available, but because the location of the volume was unknown. In every one of these stories, visibility was partial. It was milestone-based. It was "I did it." And it left teams reacting to problems they should have seen coming. What's the way forward? Step one, as always, is accepting that visibility isn't a checkbox exercise. It is a journey. You have to ask, what level are you truly operating at today? Look at that maturity graph that we outlined earlier. And then you have to pose, at what level do we need to be at in order to compete, serve, and scale? And that's why we built FlowWise, to move organizations up that maturity curve. FlowWise isn't just about seeing what's happening, it's about capturing flow over time, across partners and within context. But before we show you how FlowWise does this, let's deal with a hard truth. Visibility alone isn't the answer. In our next section, we're going to explain why seeing something late is still too late, and how timing, accuracy, and context turn data into action.